Welcome everyone. My name is Michael Hicks, and I'm your instructor for Business Administration 602, the Fundamentals of Economics and Statistics. And this is our first lecture, so we're going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes going over the class, the way I've designed it, what I expect of you, who I am, and then what you're going to need over the next several weeks as this class moves forward. So to begin this is a brand new class. You're the first group of guinea pigs walking through it. It's an asynchronous online course that's designed to prepare MBA students to better understand key statistical ideas and economic theory so that you can progress through the remainder of the courses here a little bit easier. And it's to catch you up who may have different levels of experience with these as you go forward. And so that's good. I've been teaching courses in the MBA program here for a dozen years. Before that, I taught at the Air Force Institute of Technology, where I taught statistics and economics courses to master students. And I've taught in graduate programs at Marshall University and the University of Tennessee before that. And so I think I have a pretty good sense of what you'll need to know as you go into particularly managerial economics and the healthcare economics program or anything in finance as you move forward here. So this course is going to be, because it's asynchronous, I'm going to post the material a week or two ahead. It'll be pre-recorded. There'll really be three things that we're going to do. We're going to pre-record a lecture by me, much like we see today. And as we go forward up until we get to the economics portion, that will be a fairly small component of the course. The second thing that we'll do in this course is that you'll see me talk over slides or software. When we're talking about some basic statistical inference, having access to those sorts of things directly by seeing them on screen, I think is useful. And then the third thing that we'll do online in this asynchronous context is I'll invite a number of speakers who are going to be covering the material in a different way. And that's really a fancy way of saying I've found people on YouTube in other universities doing instructional content that I think would supplement what I'm talking to you about so that you can look at somebody else in that sort of time frame. What will you need for this course? You're going to need a computer with a basic Microsoft software. You're going to have to watch these videos, of course, and you're going to need Excel, Word, and slideshow producing software. The textbooks I'm using I'm going to assign are free. They're from openstacks.org. That's openstacks with an X.org. In its introductory statistics, we'll do parts of 9 chapters or 8 chapters, and then a Principles of Microeconomics second edition. And we'll do 4 or 5 chapters in that. And I'll have those laid out in some detail as we go along. We're going to have a midterm exam and a final exam, but these will not be traditional fill-in-the-block exams or just essay exams. I'm going to have some project material for you to work with as well. And I'll work through that with you in advance. And just to keep you engaged, I'll give you some examples of what I'm looking for along the way. We live in an unusual time. This COVID-19 has upended academic and classroom processes for lots of us. I'm teaching this class primarily from home in a now disused child's nursery with a homemade green screen behind me. But most of what, and many of you are facing similar challenges wherever you are, with other people competing for bandwidth for your course and doing things with kids. For that reason, I'm going to work pretty hard to make this a series of short 10 or 15-minute lectures. Many of you it's not going to be easy to sit down for an hour to listen to a complete lecture. And so this will give you a chance to go through these and knock them out at the convenience that you have. Because it's online and asynchronous, I obviously don't have to talk to you about the university's requirements for wearing masks and for staying away from large groups and our community obligation to prevent the spread of COVID. You're not here to do that. I'm hopeful that you'll uh, abide by that the same way. The other expectations are the same, right? We have an academic ethics policy that requires you not to cheat. I'll talk to you about what that means as we get closer to it. The syllabus has information on a number of issues that will help you um, better maneuver through this class. There's technical assistance, Canvas community for students, the learning technology materials. If you are a student with a disability and you need some assistance, you can go through the BSU Disabled Student Development page, or you can just contact me directly as well about whatever additional needs you have. Typically, this is a online asynchronous course where I'm not going to have constrained time for tests and projects, so the typical concessions to students won't be made. And I should tell you, I'm a disabled veteran. I don't type really fast, and so I get that it may take time to go farther. If you have a physical disability that constrains your ability to go through this class, just contact those folks and let me know. Um, we have at our MBA program here at Ball State, which we're very proud of, by the way. This is has been top 10 to 15 online MBA program since its inception. And we're very interested in making sure that our courses connect with one another. So we have a sort of mantra of things that we want to teach you: global awareness, leadership, integration across disciplines, support of business and governmental decision making, and ethics. And so this economics course that I'm going to teach you with the statistics twist is inherently global. Economics and the use of statistics is a global tool for business. It's a global tool for government or nonprofit groups. And so it's a really important portion of uh, the context with which government and business are executed everywhere is understanding economics and using statistical modeling to better understand that. Leadership and initiative is would maybe you would not think this would be important to statistics and economics course, but there's no successful organization anywhere that doesn't formally define leadership characteristics as also being technically competent in your discipline. So this is part of leadership, just to be the more technically competent people that you're here, that you would need to be. Economics really drives, it's the science that drives the profession of business education. So the context of all the things that we talk about here in economic theory are going to be linked back to the MBA program. So we'll at some point when we get to elasticities, we'll talk about something called the Dorfman-Steiner conditions, which is a measurement of the elasticity of advertising dollars on profit. I mean, and that's the field of marketing, right? So that 1940s academic paper in economics really gave us the modern profession of marketing. When we think about the economic theory of the firm and market processes, those are management tools. Management disciplines are informed by economic theory. If you think about Michael Porter's Forces in Business, which you probably had as an undergraduate, he's an economist, trained PhD economist who's a management professor at Harvard. And then there are a number of others out there that are critical to the way we think about business. Economics did the work first, and then it's applied by these other business disciplines. For business decision making, profit maximization remains the fundamental production decision for businesses. Welfare maximization or utility maximization for households and governments. That's derived from economic theory. It's not something that we don't think through. In isolation, the disciplines of management and certainly accounting or finance that have decision criterion as part of their analysis, like an ROI, are going to be basically understanding or understood through the context of economics. And then ethical decision making, right? Economics is built around understanding trade as an important human characteristic. Adam Smith's discussion of economics was in theory of what in 1970 or 1776, 1775, was predicated on the theory of moral sentiment more than a decade earlier, which described individual behavior. And then when he talked about markets, he was building upon that earlier work that he did, perhaps arguably more important work than The Wealth of Nations, which was his best known work. And so we provide rigor to ethical determination when we're thinking about antitrust, or we're thinking about the role of market power, we're thinking about the general welfare theorem in economics. Those sorts of things are driving ethical decision making elsewhere. And without them, there's not much of a role in business ethics decision making. The way the course is going to work is pretty straightforward. I see about 14 weeks. First, we're going to start off with this modeling with data. I'm going to introduce to many of you for the first time the sort of basic understanding of what data is, how we acquire it, how do we describe it, what tools do we use to compare types of data. And then I'm going to ask you also to spend a little bit of time understanding coursework that's offered in the quantitative display or the visual display of quantitative information, which is an MBA student, and then in business, you're going to want to have some mastery of this. Even if you have a staff that does your presentations for us, showing them how to display information appropriately is critical. And it is an area in which not just people who are in my business, which I'll explain in a minute, care about, but your boss, your subordinates, your clients are going to need to understand this. Then we're going to talk about sampling and distribution theory. And this is a way to start thinking about data like a scientist. And then we're going to build in a way to think about creating testable hypothesis. That's what science does with data. And this is setting up some actual work we'll do later on in economics that is focused on that more fully. Then we'll teach you how to measure the signal to noise ratio in your work so you can reject a hypothesis. And that's really the basic scientific work that you would do in an MBA program. It's also what, as we'll see when we get to this component, this came to us from business. A vast amount of the statistical analysis that we do today came to us from businesses trying to understand quality control and or social scientists studying natural phenomena. Then we'll go into regression analysis or multivariable analysis, where we can talk about bias and bidirectional causation. And we're going to learn how to do some of this because you'll see this in later courses, but it's important that you understand this early. And that's the first 4 chapters. And then we'll have some sort of quiz test at that point, at some point in between chapters or weeks 4 and 6, because then we're going to go into economics. I'm going to give you a basic supply and demand model, and then we're going to use a statistical model to measure demand for a product. And so we're going to be going back in our first actual data analysis that's based after economic theory. And then we're going to go through a chapter on benefit cost analysis for governments, and how regulation works. And we're going to talk about elasticities of income, demand, and cross price. And then we're going to do a little data exercise for several days to estimate the elasticity of demand and income for different products and services. And we'll give you the tools to do this in later classes as well. And then we're going to end up with 4 or 5 weeks of economics. We're going to study the theory of the firm, which is really how production costs and revenue play into a firm. Then we're going to talk about markets, from perfectly competitive markets all the way up to monopolies and a broad range of those in between. And then we're going to switch into macroeconomics, or GDP growth and unemployment. Those are sort of at that point, we'll talk a little bit about how to forecast. And then we'll do fiscal and regulatory policy so that we can think a little bit about how state and federal policy influence business. And then we'll end with a banking structure and monetary policy chapter. So this is a lot of material, but we're going to breeze through the top end of it, because as you get to later courses in your graduate program and you go into more depth about it, you need to walk in understanding what it is, but the material that's going to be covered there is going to be much deeper, and you really need to spend some time working on that. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my theory and approach to learning, and how I've developed it. So I run a research center here at Ball State University, the Center for Business and Economic Research. There are 4 researchers on the team with me. I'm one of the 4. We study what causes business and people to be in the places that they are, so regional economics and tax and spending policy or fiscal policy. One of us is a healthcare economist whose work focuses on not only the demand for healthcare services and what influences that, but also the supply side about the structure of hospitals. And then we have a rural sociologist who studies how social forces play out in rural and small town America. She's also a demographer. And so you can find out more about us at our website at bsu.edu/CBER. And that gives you a long, I think, interesting story about what we do, because much of the examples that we provide, that I provide in this class, will come directly out of that research. I should also tell you that I started graduate school late. I graduated with an undergraduate degree in 1984 in economics and was commissioned an Army officer. I spent over 8 years on active duty, went back to graduate school, stayed in the Army Reserves at the same time. So I actually, the first formal college classes I taught were ROTC classes at a university. I then taught in graduate programs at the University of Tennessee as a graduate student, then as an assistant professor, just for a couple of years. And then I took a job at Marshall University where I worked in a research center, taught in their graduate program. Then I moved to the Air Force Institute of Technology, and then I've been here at Ball State. So I appreciate the challenges of being a graduate student for some time after you have finished your basic undergraduate course. If you've been out of school for 10 years, I understand this is a daunting exercise. So, please let me know if you're facing that. The goal of this course is to get you up to speed in the material that you would need to be successful in a graduate program. I also understand what it's like to try to do this work when you're juggling family life, and as I record this, I have a teenage son home from school due to online learning because of the outbreak of COVID. And so many of you are in the same boat. Basically, I prefer to tell you specifically what I think is important in my lecture and the coverage of the material that I instruct. So that ought to be your thinking part. If you understand what I've talked about and you can answer questions on that area, then you should be good. I don't surprise people in examinations. That's not the way I do professoring. I much prefer to give you material, give you a lot of material, and then test you on what you've learned, than to trick you on having learned something that I haven't covered. This isn't a course about reading Mike Hicks's mind. It's about listening to what comes out of his mouth. And so you won't see much of that approach. There are some folks who do that, and I've always been very uncomfortable with tricking students that way. Many of you are graduate students for the first time. Graduate school is different. We typically have A's, B's, C's, and F's. I don't like giving F's in graduate schools. I don't like giving C's. I'm really measuring you not against one another. This class isn't big enough for that. I'm really measuring you against a subjective level of knowledge that I think you need to have. And so we can have a number of very good grades in this class. It's not a bell curve like I do for undergraduates whom I'm providing instruction to. At the same time, for graduate students, it's very common to have a course drag out longer. Unlike most undergraduates, you have family life or a job that could interfere with this. So, I've had, students deliver children their own on, during final exam period. They've been deployed with the military. So if that's your if that's the case, just let me know. We can stretch this class out longer. And again, we're using this class as a basis for understanding what's, driving this overall course. And then finally, if there's more material that you're interested in, go out on your own. The older I get as a professor, and now that I have 2 college-age children as well, who spent most of last semester, at least half of last semester in my house, taking undergraduate courses online in a variety of fields, including economics. And I think in this online environment, it's oftentimes very good to listen to what other people have to say. So if I cover basic definition of data and you're not uncomfortable with it, go look somebody else's work up. You can do it in the Khan Academy. You can do it online in YouTube or somewhere else. Many of these instruction components are very good. Some of them aren't as good. I've seen a lot of them in developing this course, but even something that is maybe not as aimed at graduate students, if it covers the material and it helps you understand it, don't be afraid to use it. So, I encourage you to think about those different tools. We live in a exciting modern age in which we have access to instruction across the board in different areas. So if I talk about the chi-squared test and you just don't get what I'm saying, look up chi-squared test on YouTube. You'll probably find somebody doing a if not better job and more tailored job for you personally. And again, I'm easiest to get a hold by email, mhicks@bsu.edu. This is my office number. I'm going to be at work off and on throughout the semester. I'll be at home working most of the time, working you through these problems. And so with that, I believe I've covered the syllabus adequately. I'm hopeful that each of you are here because you choose to do an exciting MBA program, to learn more about business and government decision making, to get a better sense of how commerce works in the world, and to improve your career prospects, whether you're working in government, nonprofit, if you're running your own medical office, or if you're a brand new graduate who is using this to prepare themselves for a business career. I welcome you to this class. I think you'll find that not just me, but my colleagues at the Miller College of Business are extraordinarily dedicated to the performance of their students, and that even with this online challenge that many of us are facing with COVID, that we're anxious to be in touch with you. And so the downside of asynchronous online courses is that I spent 25 years looking into the faces of students, staring into their eyes, trying to understand if they did or did not get a good sense of the material that I just covered. So all that social or emotional capital that I developed over 25 years, I have to find some other way around it. So I ask your forbearance if I ask questions in emails, or if if there's anything you don't understand, please let me know quickly, because it's likely that you are not alone. It's just the nature of these online courses. So with that, this ends lecture 1.1.1, and we'll see you with the next lecture very shortly. Thank you.